Our first panel tonight features two voices of the 117th Congress. They are just finishing their first term, and we talked backstage a little bit, and they have some wisdom to share. They've already made their mark in Washington. Please welcome Representative Nancy Mace and Jake Auchincloss. I like the drink. What's the drink? Cosmo. Oh, okay.
It's delicious.
I gave you the first question, but I stole it.
No, perfectly fine. I'm actually more curious as to why Congressman Auchincloss didn't get a drink either.
It's a good question for my staff, I think.
So I'll be asking you guys first question. I wanted to actually have you guys debate over which state you think is better between the two, but Bob told me that that would cause too much drama in one night. So I said I'll keep it safe. So Congressman Auchincloss, I want to ask you a question first. So I want you to describe to me, in any words possible, your first term in Congress. How would you describe it?
Historic. We came in facing the worst crisis in our democracy since the Civil War, the worst public health crisis since World War I, complicated economic situation since World War II, and had to act in rapid succession and really had the most productive Congress in modern history. It was bipartisan infrastructure law, bipartisan support for Ukraine, bipartisan gun safety legislation, bipartisan semiconductor and science investments, the Inflation Reduction Act, which was the biggest, boldest climate action and clean energy commitment in history. So it very much felt like I was had the opportunity to participate and be involved in a Congress that was historically productive.
I mean, considering how long that list went and how much was on the plate for a lot of people in Congress, especially during your first term, tell me, how much sleep do you guys end up getting when it comes down to it?
Yeah, the rate limiting factor in my sleep is the fact that I've got a 2.5-year-old and a 1-year-old at home. So there's nothing that politics can throw at me that's gonna be harder than that.
Do you think that maybe your history as a Marine, do you think that that also plays a role in what you do now day to day?
100%, in a number of ways. Probably the most important, though, for me is so much of our political rhetoric these days is fight, it's a battle, they're the enemy, and I really stiff-arm that mindset. I don't believe in it. We are meant to have heated debates. That's what Congress's job is to disagree productively. But the other side's not the enemy, and it can't be. We know who the bad guys are in this world, and we have got to dial back the temperature in the room because it's not what the American people want to see from us.
Last question that I have for you, and I wanted to bring it back to a point that you brought up before. You said you have kids who keep you up a lot. Talk to me about how that encourages you and influences you in terms of how you're able to go about your day-to-day, because obviously you're going back and forth between back in Massachusetts and coming here to DC. And one of the things I noticed is you posted a tweet not too long ago where you had stickers all over your legs from them just decking you out. So talk to me about that whole complex.
Yeah, it makes the job feel both bigger and smaller. So it makes the job feel smaller because, someone's being mean to me in the press, or I'm on the losing side of an issue on the floor, and it can weigh on you. But then I come home and Grace wants to put stickers all over me, and that helps me kind of put that at the threshold, and it makes the job, puts it in perspective about what really matters. But it also makes the job feel bigger, because when I take a vote on climate action and clean energy, when I take a vote on guns, I humanize and personalize it. I can see it in my own children. And so they're helpful perspective in both ways.
So glad I was able to hear from you. Bob?
Congresswoman, I just wanted to ask you, we have some incoming members now. You were an incoming member a couple years ago. Obviously, the pandemic made things challenging. But what advice would you have, whether it's work-life balance, working with the media? What advice would you give?
This is one of the toughest jobs you could ever have. I would say, in terms of any advice that I have, I would tell all incoming freshmen, all new members, not to forget why they're here in the first place. You're here to serve your constituents, and there are a lot of things that go on in DC, that are very challenging. You may pass bills, you might not. You're going to vote on hundreds, if not thousands, of pieces of legislation. But if you're not taking care of your constituents back home, if you forget about them, you won't be coming back. And that's the reason that we all got elected, was to serve our constituencies. And I have, I think, a snapshot of the country. I joked with Jake earlier before we came out here. I have like the tale of two districts. I have very blue areas and I have very red areas. And I remember when President Biden was talking about pardoning the pot crimes at the federal level and looking at descheduling or rescheduling, cannabis. And I praised him on a Friday. And then on a Saturday, I'm doing shots in a honky-tonk bar and riding a mechanical bull, right? And so you got to remember who you're serving and to be there with your constituents every single day, meeting their needs. And that is the most fulfilling part of the job.
Did you set any records on the bull?
It was in slow motion.
Oh, it's so slow motion. Okay.
It was Instagram quality, bull riding.
What would be helpful for the new members to know as far as what surprised you? I mean, we were talking earlier before about how the Capitol to me is still a maze.
I still
what
get
surprised
lost
you? It's
in
very
the
easy
Capitol.
to get lost.
I
Very
get
easy.
lost. I get lost a lot still, even 2 years in. But I want to talk about something that Jake had mentioned earlier, lowering the temperature.
Yeah.
One of the things that surprised me, and I know we see the partisanship back home, but it didn't have to be that way. And it's up to us, leaders of this country, to set the temperature, to talk about things in a way where we can debate ideas, we can debate legislation, and we don't have to attack or literally physically fight each other out on the streets. And I think that's really important to set a good example that you can be a conservative. I consider myself very fiscally conservative, but in my first term in the minority as a conservative, I helped pass over 20 bills out of committee, out of over 10 out of the floor of the House. You can make magic happen up here if you're willing to try and work hard and reach across the aisle.
That's an interesting point because other members have said in prior events that we've had that you can be in the minority and actually make a difference. And a lot of people don't know that, especially in the House.
We were huge. I mean, I was, someone asked me today about the Democrat leadership races and what's going on there. One of the very first bill I ever helped pass out of the House was with Hakeem Jeffries, working on civil rights issues. A Republican, a conservative working on civil rights, and that was one of the first bills I helped pass out of the House. It is absolutely doable. I've done a lot of work with Ro Khanna in California. I constantly reach across the aisle, and even when the Republicans are in the majority starting January 3rd, my door is going to be wide open to anyone who's willing to work with me. I don't care if they have an R or a D by their name, and we have got to get back to basics and remember why we were elected in the first place.
Congressman, you want to jump in there on that point?
Well, I want to agree with everything that Nancy just said. And one thing I tried to do, and a piece of advice I would give to new members, and I'm hoping to continue doing, the House floor is really actually a tremendous place to learn. I think if you walk onto the House floor and you have a student mindset as opposed to a campaign mindset or a politician's mindset, and you say, I want to have 434 conversations with other members and see if I can have them speak 80% of the time, which is not hard because we're all politicians, and see what I can learn from them about why they're running, what their district is like, what they care about. It's an unbelievably impactful way to forge relationships and just to educate yourself on everything that's happening in Congress. And frankly, I wish I had done that more even in my first term, and I'm committed to doing it more in my second. And I would encourage new members to get out there on the House floor and just see how many one-on-one student-teacher conversations they can have with other members, because we all have something to learn from each other.
Well, I actually think it's interesting both of you have brought that up because, especially for us on the reporting side, we're always trying to get both sides of it. We want both Republicans and we want Democrats to be able to talk about both perspectives of whatever story we're covering, whether it be a bill or something that's going on in Congress. And especially for both of you actually have large track records of trying to work with people across the aisle on bills and legislation. So do you guys see, is there a method to it in order to, because you said coming into it with an open mind, not coming in with a single perspective. Is that the key to it? Or is there like another way of going about it that your colleagues that are just coming in, you want them to implement that?
I would say, to set politics aside, I mean, this is, a lot of people, some people, not all, but some members will use the floor as a launch pad for their political career. But that doesn't deliver results for the district that you represent. And both Jake and I have shown that you know, if you have the right kind of temperament, you're willing to watch, listen, and learn, you can be a very effective member, even in the minority. So for any freshmen who are Democrats and they're here tonight, all is not lost just because Republicans will be in the majority. There are members like myself who are willing to either agree to disagree on an issue or find a way to work together. And I learned that as a freshman, and I've seen the members, the Democrats, who've been willing to work with me on different issues. But there are Republicans who are willing to say, hey, we don't agree on 80% of the things, but where we can agree, we've got to do right by the states that we represent. If you look at the election just a couple weeks ago, the members who represented their constituencies did the best. Those that were placating to the far right or the far left fared the worst. Americans are sick and tired of the nastiness, the fighting. They want us to deliver results. Their milk and their gas, everything they buy right now is more expensive than it's ever been. Inflation is the highest it's been in 40 years. And we can argue about whose fault that is. I'll tell you it's Republicans and Democrats. It's not one or the other. But at the end of the day, people are struggling. They're challenged. Business owners can't hire employees because everyone's going to get a different job at a larger company with wage inflation. It's so challenging. But if we work together, we can be so much more effective. And so I just want to tell members who are here today, my office door is open. You want to work on an issue, I don't care what it is, but if we can find common ground, we'll do it. And we'll work together and we'll be successful.
No, I think she said it well.
Is there anything you would do, one of our last questions, differently to both of you, knowing what you know now?
I think when I took office, I felt like I was in a hurry in the first 3 months. And partly we were. I mean, we Democrats were in charge of the House, the Senate, the White House. Like, there was certainly a momentum behind passing legislation. Obviously, we had a lot of stuff going on. But I would just encourage new members to, and I would say, you're not in a hurry to make your most consequential decisions. Don't be in a hurry necessarily to hire. Don't be in a hurry to sign on to letters or to push bills. Be in a hurry to get out there in your district, and whatever kind of enmity exists after a hard campaign, which I'm sure many people had, heal those wounds, get a lot of shoe leather out there in the district, and then be in a hurry to focus on the letters and the caucus politics and all that stuff. Start district and then work your way into Washington.
I 100% agree. And the only thing I would add to what Jake just said, for the fresh members, I would hire slow and fire fast.
100%.
If you don't make it in the first 90 days of my office, your ass is out. Like, you're out. We don't want you, but it's that I would agree with that. And I would focus on your constituent services right away. Legislation will come after you've, had a little bit of time, whether that's a couple of months or a couple of years to pass legislation. But I would really focus on the constituent side of it and focus on building a team. This is a hard job. Your staff make low wages. They work long hours. They're dedicated to you, your district, your job. Make sure that you're building a team for the long term so you can be the most effective member that you can possibly be during your tenure here.
Well, I think we've run out of time, but please thank our panel. Bipartisanship does exist in Washington. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
And so for our second panel of veteran members, please join us in welcoming Representatives Garrett Graves, Alma Adams, and John Katko.
Yeah, you bet.
So, Congresswoman, I want to start with you. Do you really have 1,000 hats?
No, I have 1,408.
That's a lot of hats.
It is.
So, wearing a lot of hats, you must have some good advice for the new members, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's not what's on your head, it's what's inside. That's what I used to tell my students, but
That's
I
good
do
advice.
have some good advice.
Go ahead. What do you got?
Well, first of all, I want to congratulate all of our new members, and I just want to encourage you to have an opportunity to meet the other members. I've had some great experiences working across the aisle. There are many things that we don't agree on, but there are many things that we do agree. And I think I have found many opportunities to work with my colleagues and French Hill has been one that we formed a relationship, and we have a bipartisan HBCU caucus. We've got over 120 members right now. We came in together. But I would also say, get good staff. Get good staff. And if you can, keep them. But if you can't, move them along. But I do think that they are and can be our biggest advocates as members of Congress, because they're out of the office. They're meeting people just as they are here tonight, for helping to forge relationships. I would also say that when opportunities come up for CODELs, that's another way to get away from the Hill and have an opportunity to meet not only your other members, but also their families. And that's a good thing to do as well. So it's been wonderful for me for the past 8 years, having been a professor for 40 years. I find that while I'm not teaching in the classroom, you have many opportunities here in the Congress to teach. And to learn, and that's a good thing.
Congressman Katko, you're retiring. What have you learned, and what kind of wisdom can you share?
What I've learned is that since I announced I'm retiring, nobody pays attention to me anymore, but that's okay. When I came into Congress, I came in a very difficult district. It was 5% more Democrat than Republican, and so every vote's difficult. But one thing I learned early on was to respectfully stand up to leadership and don't let them dictate what you're going to vote and how you're going to vote. And what I always did was tell them in advance if I can't be with them, issue a statement that doesn't denigrate what they're trying to do, but explains my point. And then don't do a bunch of interviews that are contrary to what the interests of the party are. So kind of lay low if you have to take a tough vote. And I've taken a lot of them. But standing up to leadership and letting them know that you got to vote your district as opposed to please them, I think is probably one of the best pieces of advice I can give you. And I can tell you, doing that, you will survive. They will respect you. But if early on they sense that they can get you to whip you to vote for them all the time, they will. And I'm on the whip team, I'm a senior member of the whip team, so I know that for a fact. But doing what you think is right for your district is really important. And I guess the biggest thing I'll say is don't ever cast a vote or start casting votes to save your job. Because when you start casting votes to save your job, next thing you know, you lose your identity, and that's not a good thing. And I've seen a lot of people do that, and I hope that doesn't happen. So that's one thing I'd really strongly suggest. You can clap on that one. I saw you clapping. Come on.
That's Katko's staff.
Congressman, before I hand it over to Basil, as far as forming relationships and bipartisanship, what is your advice? Because a lot of people, certainly who view the House, see this as a very partisan chamber, and it is. But at the same time, there are good relationships that are bipartisan. That's you.
Hey, first, I just want to say congratulations to all of you who were elected, and to your campaign teams and staff. Congrats. That's phenomenal. One of the greatest jobs in the world, but it's all about functionality and what you're able to do. And of course, your question is right on. Look, I'll just tell you, I'm from South Louisiana, and I serve on 3 committees. And on all 3 committees, there's this guy, Jared Huffman from California, and you can tell him I said this. He's crazy. All right, he's crazy. But you know what? He's a good friend of mine. He and I are ideologically about as far apart as you can get, but he's unavoidable, I'm unavoidable, and so we're friends. And I think what's most important is getting to know some of these people that are unavoidable on a personal level. And so Jared and I will have knockdown, drag-out fights in committee on the House floor over policy. But it's over policy. And Jared is a friend of mine. Our votes, again, our vote records couldn't be more different. But I think it's important to establish those personal relationships. One of the first things I did, I said, hey, look, I want you to come down to South Louisiana. I want you to spend 3 days with me. I'm going to take you all around. I'm going to introduce you to people. I'm going to show you our energy resources, our coastal issues, our hurricane vulnerabilities, our ports. And he did it. And I said, look, I'm not trying to get you to vote the way that I vote, but I want you to understand who and what it is that we're representing and what it is we're trying to do. Profound. And I'd urge you, do that. Everything your leadership's going to do, and listen to Katko because he's got the courage of a farewell address here. you need to develop those personal relationships because your leadership's going to try and keep you in partisan corners. And it's really important that you develop your own relationships with people. I'll say it again, people that are unavoidable, that you're on committees with, that you're going to be working with no matter what.
Congresswoman Mace, I want to start with you. So, I mean, sorry, I'm all over the place right now, obviously. Congresswoman Adams, I want to start with you. So, the thing that I wanted to bounce off of was you talked about your role as an educator. And I know that that's been very pivotal whenever you've spoken to our reporters in Nexstar talking about how much it's affected your role in Congress. What I want to go off of is obviously with every professor or teacher, they have teaching staff with them. And for you, I would say your colleagues end up being that teaching staff in this setting. So for you, what ultimately ends up being those lessons that you feel are necessary for others to learn? And how do you do it in an effective manner that everybody can understand it and actually acknowledge and comprehend it?
Well, thank you for the question. I've had 40 years in the classroom as a professor, so I think I've learned some things throughout that time. But one of the things that I learned right away when I came to Congress was that I could learn something from young folks who, for 40 years, they've been learning from me. And so you're right, they become your teachers. I'm not an expert on everything, but I do find that listening and having good staff who understand not only what they're doing, but who understand what we're trying to accomplish together. I've always considered myself to be a stakeholder representative, and I just believe that you have to know what your stakeholders want. You need to know what they need, and you need to stay in touch with them. Service is the rent we pay for living on this earth, and as an elected official for almost 40 years in local, state, and now at the federal level, I have found that it's just really important to not only stay in touch with the people and understand the people that you're representing, and to do right by them. Because if you don't do right by them, they're not going to do right by you.
To follow up on that, one of the big topics that we've seen is bipartisanship. And have you been able to see during your time so far cases and examples where you're learning from the other side and you're able to meet in the middle of the aisle?
Well, absolutely I have. I mentioned the bipartisan HBCU caucus, which I co-founded when I came to Congress. French Hill and I have been partners. I've been to his district, met many of the professors and administrators there at the colleges, so that's good. I think you can do that. We also have another bipartisan caucus that I started with one of my Democrat colleagues to address the issues of Black maternal health. And we have a variety of colleagues in that caucus as well, because health is one of my H's. I have 4: health, higher education, hunger. And those things are just really important. But yes, it's an opportunity for me as an educator who taught for all those years to continue to learn and to do some teaching here as well.
I'm glad that you got to say all that, because one of the points I wanted to bring that up with Congressman Graves about, he's actually one of the few people who I've seen who he represents his hometown where he was brought up. So Congressman, I want to get your thoughts, because she touched on the fact that there are so many issues usually back in your the areas that you represent that end up meaning a lot to you. So for you especially, how do you end up staying connected with those constituents that you've basically known your entire life? And how are you able to bring that to the bigger picture? Because obviously population, communities, it's all different across the board, whether it's for Republican areas or for Democrat areas.
Well, first, look, one of our secrets, you're going to have pollsters that'll come to you and they'll say, hey, look, you give me 20 grand, I'll get your poll and I'll tell you what's going on in your district. One of the things that we do on a regular basis, I have about 5 diners or breakfast or lunch spots that I just go circulate through. I will go spend an hour and a half at each one, and I'm telling you, you give me 2 spots. You give me 3 hours, let me go hit 2 spots. I'll beat the hell out of any poll that there is in our district. Go spend time with people. We were one of the first members to do Facebook Live, doing it on a regular basis, giving yourself a venue for accountability and dialogue. You are going to learn what is important to your constituents, what their top priorities are, and you're going to be in sync with them. So yeah, it's my hometown. You know, I lived there, I left, I came back, but there is no substitute for actually spending time there with the people that you're representing. And it's actually helpful both ways. It's helpful for you because you're learning what's on people's minds, what their priorities are, but two, you can actually convey or decipher the craziness of Washington back to them and help to distill information on issues and what's actually going on here.
So when it comes to issues like that, obviously there are plenty that affect Americans day-to-day basis where they know what's going on. Inflation, for example, because people are seeing and experiencing it firsthand when they go to the store. But then talking about issues like climate change, I feel like climate change gets so nuanced sometimes that a lot of people, even when you break it down, it can be difficult. So how do you communicate that back to the people in your hometowns? But then how do you also meet people across the aisle with it?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I'll give you a piece of advice. It's going to be really easy to slide into the Washingtonian speak of all the acronyms and everything else. Don't do it. Don't do it. And so here's the thing. Look, climate change, it's like a lot of these other really polarizing issues. Yeah, you can bring it up in a room, and you're going to have all the Republicans go over here and Democrats go over here. You know, people can call them deniers and enviro freaks and all that stuff. It does nothing to advance the issue. Actually breaking it up in bite-sized pieces. Let's sit down and let's talk about resiliency for just a minute. Who's going to argue, whether you're conservative or you're liberal, who's going to argue about making investments in the safety and security of your communities, making sure that your communities where people live, where their families are, where their homes are, where all of their income is tied up in their businesses, their churches, their schools, who's going to oppose making investments that actually save money in the long term? Nobody is. So let's talk about resiliency. Let's talk about a second issue. Let's talk about conservation and energy efficiency. I'm going to bring up solutions that are going to reduce the cost of energy, that are going to reduce the amount of energy consumed to build widgets in your district, which is going to make the company that you represent more competitive because they're going to be more efficient at producing that widget. So you just save them money, you lowered energy consumption, and you just reduced emissions. Let me ask you again, who is going to oppose solutions like that? Who is? It doesn't matter if you're liberal or conservative. So I think taking some of these complex issues that are really easy for you to slide into that acronym speak, break them up into bite-sized pieces. Sit down with people that may be polar opposites of yours and find bite-sized pieces that you can agree on, develop a trusting relationship, build on it, and move forward.
Unfortunately, we've run out of time, but this has been some great advice. Avoid acronyms, hire great staff, and heads up to the leadership, right? That is actually great advice. Please thank our panel of lawmakers.
New members touching down here in Washington, getting their first taste of life on Capitol Hill. We're talking to several future lawmakers about how they're approaching their new jobs in Congress. Congressman-elect, what kind of feeling do you get hearing that?
You know, it's funny. I was a military guy, and each rank you kind of get used to hearing that next rank. It sounds a little foreign to you at first. And then when you go to medical school and you get called doctor for the first time, it's just another evolution in who I am. And it's exciting to be here taking part in history and something that only a few people get to do. And so I'm very honored.
You said you were just working how many shifts in the ER and then you came here?
Just got done working 6 overnights during that Thanksgiving week. And then the same day I got off work, I flew back up here to start another week of orientation.
So what's going to be tougher, the endless ER shifts or being in Congress, you think?
Oh, we're about to find that out, aren't we? I think totally different challenge. What I like about it, I mean, all my life, whether you be laying on carriers or in the ER with things going wrong, at least, I mean, in my perspective, nobody's dying. Nobody's taking rounds right now. You have time to take a deep breath, have a discussion, and make some good decisions, hopefully.
And did I read you have 7 kids? Is that...
That's right. My wife and I, we have 7 together. We were both single parents at one point. I was going through medical school. She took on a huge challenge and got me over the top.
What do they think about your journey to Washington?
I think they enjoy the history that we're making right now. I think, as Plato once said, the problem with not being in politics is you're always destined to be ruled over by your inferiors. And if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. And so it's important to be part of this conversation as we move forward and we define what America is, what made it the greatest nation in the world, what's going to keep it that way. This is an important conversation to have.
What has surprised you the most about being in Congress? You're not in Congress yet, but being here in Washington.
Gosh, how much history there is everywhere I look. I mean, I'm a big history buff anyway, so I love looking at the walls. I look down at the floor, and this is where Lincoln's desk was. That's the clock that he looked at when he was in Congress. This is the couch that John Quincy Adams died in 1848 after he came back to Congress after being president, and he was fighting for the abolition of slavery. Just being in awe of that, and then realizing that the bickering that we're having in Congress, whether it be between Democrats and Republicans, or Republicans and Republicans, or Democrats and Democrats, is nothing new. We've seen duels. We've seen people have fisticuffs. It's just a continuation of politics. It is what it is. I've been wearing my very fancy shoes on the floor, and I realize how uncomfortable they are when you have to walk everywhere all day. So I think with the permission of the Congress, I'm going to be wearing some very fancy Vans, which will feel good on my feet as I'm walking. Same thing I wear in the ER every day. They breathe nice. They wear good.
Flying back and forth from Oregon to Washington, are you getting used to the flight at this point?
I am. I was mayor of Happy Valley for 8 years, and I would come back to Washington, D.C. for the U.S. Conference of Mayors twice a year. So you kind of get used to it. But I think every week it's going to be a little tedious. But I'll tell you, you can get work done, maybe get some little shut-eye in between. But it's going to be a good time to focus on what I'm going to do when I get back every week and talk to what the constituents are talking about. I want to do lots of town halls. I mean, this is an important seat for Oregon. So I think that 6 hours on the way home will give me time to study and get things on the ground going when I'm there for the weekend, and then head back on Sunday nights.
What has surprised you the most about being here in Washington so far?
Surprised me the most, the diversity, how many young new members there are. I'm so excited to see, we're seeing 25-year-olds, 30-year-olds, 40-year-olds, a diverse group. And in the Republican Party, I am the Republican member-elect, and we're seeing the diversity there. Hiring people is exciting to see all the young people on the Hill that want to do better for the country. So I don't think I recognize how many new members were so young. So it's an exciting time for America.
Being in a campaign can get pretty ugly and a bit different than actually working in Congress. Is it going to change your approach now that you're here in D.C.?
Oh, the races get tough because we all want to win to represent our districts, but we have to do good work. And, there's other members from Oregon on the Democratic side that I would love to work with. I've gotten to know both of them, some more than others back in Oregon. I didn't know Congresswoman-elect Andrea Salinas very well, but certainly we'll talk. We'll be on the plane together. We'll be coming back and forth. It's going to be a time to do good bipartisan work for Oregon.
Is there a certain camaraderie among new members, even if they're across the political aisle?
Yeah, I think so. We're excited, right? I mean, it's a new thing to get used to Washington, D.C., just getting used to the halls, getting used to what the rules are, understanding that we're running, really multi-million-dollar businesses for our constituents, making sure that we're following all the proper rules. And, we can learn from the new members. They've been super helpful on both sides. I mean, as we sit for lunch, oftentimes we're sitting with Democrats and Republicans. We're just talking about how do we work together? How do we get things done for the American people? So that's what I'm most attuned to. Certainly we'll be on our opposite sides. We might not all agree on everything, but I think the American people in this election decided that they want some bipartisan work to do, make government work for them.
There aren't many people who've done this in the history of the country. And so to be one of those few is just a huge honor, and obviously it comes with a lot of responsibility, and you feel that immediately.
You're a former high school teacher. You were city council member. What do you think is going to be harder, whipping the students into shape or working in Congress?
Well, I suspect there's a lot that I'll be able to take from my days as a teacher or working at City Hall. I mean, everything's about relationships, right? You want to build really healthy, collaborative relationships and build trust with folks. And that's the same, like if you're teaching and you've done that, your kids they'll want to learn. If you haven't, they don't want to learn. It's the same with colleagues. If you've built trust with them and you're collaborative, they'll want to work with you. And the opposite is true. So, I spent a lot of time on relationships, and I'll do that here.
Have you gotten the frequent flyer miles at this point? Are you used to the flight back and forth?
I don't think I'll ever get used to that. I like being home. I'm a big Cincy guy, right? Like, so, being in the districts where I'll spend most of my time, obviously we'll be up here to vote and to get as much work done as I can for the district. But I'll be very excited to be on that flight home. I just, I love my city and love the region, and I like being home.
What has surprised you the most about being here in Washington?
I think the transition between, the majority and the minority, or, one party taking over from, the other party, and just how much uncertainty there is. And I think that, is surprising a lot of folks. I mean, there are people who've gone through that transition. I obviously haven't. So there's just a lot of open-ended questions in terms of, committees, who's going to be on what's going to be open, but also what's the best way to get things done. It's not clear yet. And that's really important to me. Productivity and getting as much done and having the most impact is all that matters. And so figuring that out and letting the dust settle is what I'm very anxious for.
Is there any camaraderie among new members, even if they're on the other side of the political aisle?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think there's still going to be a divide as it relates to not a partisan one, as much as one that's based on democracy, right? So for those Republicans who didn't support what happened on January 6th, that, didn't buy into the big lie, that understand the importance of the peaceful transfer of power, I do think there's, going to be really strong relationships. For some of us, it's going to be very difficult, if not impossible, to get over, somebody's role in January 6th. It was a dark, dark day. And if we don't take it seriously, it can happen again. And we can't ever let it happen again.
How did it feel when you first landed in Washington knowing that you were going to be a member of Congress?
It was kind of a surreal experience, and then going to the House floor, that's really the core of our country, and for me to be there was really remarkable. But I'll be honest, when it really struck home, I went to the Marine Corps birthday cake cutting, and having the Deputy Commandant of the Marine Corps call me sir, and I'm a retired enlisted guy, it was when I really realized something has changed in my life. So it's very humbling, actually.
You were in the military, you said?
I'm a retired Navy SEAL. I was in for 26 years. I did 5 combat deployments as a SEAL.
What is going to be tougher, being a Navy SEAL or trying to manage your way through Congress?
That is an excellent question. And I've been here for a week and 2 days, and so I'll probably tell you in a little bit. Yeah.
Has anything surprised you so far?
Not really. I mean, both sides have been incredibly professional and courteous. And I had expected that, but you always wonder what it's going to be like once you get inside of a room with folks. But no, everyone's been completely cordial, and I really appreciate that type of professionalism.
Do you have any funny stories that you're willing to share about your time here in D.C. so far?
Well, okay, I got lost. All right, I'll admit it. I'm a Navy SEAL, and I got lost walking around in the tunnels underneath the Capitol. And I just kind of chuckled a little bit and asked for directions, but there's a lot to get used to. And one of them is just the layout of where I'm going to work. Yeah.
Did you get your office at this point, or is that to come?
We draw on Friday.
Are you crossing your fingers for any specific location?
Well, I've lived in bushes made of poison oak before for a week at a time. So, I mean, an office is nice. I just want a place where my staff can work efficiently, and I want to be able to host people that come from the district. So I think it's really important that we maintain that connection with the people that we're representing. I mean, we've got 750,000 people, and I'm supposed to be their voice at that building back there. I take that really seriously, and I want to be able to host them, regardless of their party or their affiliation, whether or not they voted for me or not. That's all irrelevant. And we need to get to that place in American politics where I can just flat out represent someone's best interest in Congress, because that's what I'm getting paid to do.
Congressman-elect, how does it sound? Are you getting used to it?
Well, it's great to be here. Obviously, I think the freshman class is so great, especially for those of us on the Democratic side. It's a really diverse group of people. We're just excited to represent our communities. I've been mayor of my city for 8 years. To continue to serve the city in this role is really great. So we'll look forward to it.
What has surprised you the most about being here in Washington so far?
Honestly, I think what surprised me, if I was a little nervous about it, is just how incredibly close like our classes become, and I admire them. I respect them. I think we become a really great like bond, and that's been a really great surprise at how close we become so fast. And so I think a lot of us are going to continue to support each other, even though we might have different political ideologies. I think we're going to have a Big Ten approach to supporting each other, and I think that's really great.
Is there anyone across the aisle that you've actually become friendly with, like that you can admit that you're friendly with?
I mean, honestly, most of the folks that I've remained friendly with are all in the Democratic caucus, and so I've met some Republicans. They're doing their thing, but we're ready to roll up our sleeves and really push back on I think some of the craziness that's going to come out of the Republican caucus with this new majority. But we're ready to fight on that, but most importantly, just to support each other within our own Democratic caucus.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but the first openly gay immigrant elected to Congress?
Yeah, I've obviously really important for me on immigration issues as an immigrant myself. Came to the U.S. when I was 5 years old, became a citizen at 21. Those issues are really important to me, and certainly as a gay person, I know that I have an additional responsibility to represent the community as a LGBTQ immigrant. But I think what's most important is that those identities are part of who I am, but not everything. And at the end of the day, I want to make sure that I'm delivering back for the community. As mayor, I think being the first openly gay mayor was important. Being an immigrant mayor was important. It was most important that we deliver back to the neighborhoods and the community. So that's what I hope to do here and work within the caucus to do that.